Australia is one of the most successful economies in the world. Its citizens enjoy a level of wealth that is only matched by 4 or 5 other places on the planet, all of which are much smaller nations overall. It has also enjoyed relatively stable economic output, maintaining its record of avoiding a recession for more than 30 years. This is impressive except for the fact that, by most logical economic reasoning, Australia's economy should be a total failure. It has made most of the same mistakes as many other countries around the world that are currently dealing with hyperinflation, mass unemployment, national bankruptcies, and in some cases, near-total societal failure. But Australia soldiers on, and the question is why? Understanding how Australia has managed to avoid catastrophe while making all of the same moves as countries that have fared far worse could teach economists a lot about small differences that resulted in dramatically different outcomes. So why should Australia be an economic failure? How has it avoided all of its problems? Is its luck sustainable in the long term? And finally, is there anything that other countries can learn from Australia's unique approach to economic management? One thing to note is that for most of these economic issues, there is another country in a similar position, Canada. Although Canada faces these problems or opportunities in a slightly less severe way. Also, a small disclaimer is that I am, of course, personally from Australia, so I would like to believe that our current way of doing things is sustainable. However, just because we want something to be true doesn't mean that it is. Australia's success stumps many economists because, in many ways, it has the wealth and prosperity of an advanced economy, but with the industries of a developing economy. Mining and housing make up a concerningly large share of Australia's economic output. Mining, in particular, is a notoriously unstable industry that is at the mercy of global markets, trade tensions, and the performance of other economies thousands of kilometers away. Australia's second-largest physical export is coal, a crude fossil fuel that most of the world is moving away from as part of efforts to be more environmentally sustainable. Australia is also heavily dependent on just one trading partner, China, which buys over 40% of its exports. Of course, Australia is blessed with some of the most abundant natural resources in the world, and those resources are shared among a very small population of just under 26 million people. So, unlike a country like the USA, Australia could theoretically live very comfortably off these revenues. The problem with selling raw natural resources directly to international trading partners is that they are very profitable and don't require much local production. While this might sound beneficial to the companies extracting these resources, it can cause major problems for the country itself. We've explored the issue of the resource curse or Dutch disease in dozens of videos on this channel before, so I won't repeat too much for regular viewers. Briefly, the issue specifically relevant to Australia is that it has been very hard to turn those natural resources into a genuine improvement in the national economy. Exports are counted as a component of output, or GDP, alongside consumption, investment, and government spending. However, just because shipping dirt or lumps of coal overseas might make economic output figures look good, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's benefiting the regular economic participants in the country. Most major mining operations in Australia are incredibly remote and employ a relatively small workforce that is transported to these locations by mining companies and then transported back out. These are known as fly-in, fly-out, or FIFO workers. While these workers are on site in the mines, they have most things provided for them by the company they work for, from food to accommodation. This effectively separates one of the most lucrative industries in the country from any interaction with the rest of the economy. In contrast, industries like finance or technology, centered around major cities in the USA, Western Europe, and Asia, are very lucrative but also contribute to the local economy. Everyone employed in these jobs will go out shopping, go out for dinner, or do anything that supports the local economy around them. This recirculation of money means that even people not directly involved in these major industries can still benefit from them. But when the centers of industry are literally thousands of kilometers from major population centers, it makes it much harder for workers to recirculate their money. Additionally, these mines employ fewer people to begin with. These issues could be alleviated if the revenues from these mining operations were reinvested into the domestic economy. The most direct way to do this would be to tax resource sales and then use the tax revenue to fund various government projects. Norway is a prime example of this being done effectively. The Norwegian government has heavily taxed natural resource revenues from private companies and even set up their own state company to generate income directly. The money is then put into a giant national savings account called a sovereign wealth fund, which invests the money and uses those earnings to fund government services. It's the gold standard for ensuring that the resource wealth of a nation benefits its people, as natural resources alone won't create domestic economic activity. Australia does have a sovereign wealth fund, the Future Fund, but that money came from the privatization sale of assets like Australia's telecommunications company Telstra. The fund is also worth only about 1/7 of Norway's fund in a country with 5 times as many people because it receives no direct revenues from natural resources. Unfortunately, the Australian government has failed to levy direct taxes on mining, and today much of the wealth generated from this industry goes largely to benefit a few extremely wealthy individuals or international resource companies that send their profits back to their home countries. Foreign cash transfers are not part of economic output figures, so a country can be losing money without it being reflected in GDP alone. Other industries like tech and finance have also caused problems, such as massive inequality between wealthy people working in lucrative jobs and everyone else. This also happens in Australia with mining. FIFO workers are paid extremely well and can easily outcompete regular workers for things like housing, which is another major issue in the Australian economy. However, a handful of well-paid workers are far from the biggest cause of this problem. Housing in Australia is some of the most expensive in the world, which on the surface doesn't make much sense. The price of housing, like the price of any other good or service, is determined by the forces of supply and demand. On the supply side, Australia has an abundance of land, being the 6th largest country in the world by total land mass. However, it has a relatively small population, with fewer people inhabiting the entire continent than those living in a few major cities around the world. Despite this vast land, Australian homes remain unaffordable, which provides insight into market dynamics. The price of housing might be driven by supply and demand, but these forces themselves are influenced by many individual factors. Addressing supply is more straightforward in Australia. While the country is huge, most of it is uninhabited desert. The majority of the population lives close to the coast in a few dense cities, mainly Sydney and Melbourne, which rank high on affordability scales. My own home, Sydney, is the most expensive city in Australia and the second most expensive in the world. It sits in a natural bowl surrounded by mountains on 3 sides and the ocean on the 4th, limiting available land. Additionally, Australians culturally prefer large, freestanding homes, further reducing available land because these homes take up more space than apartments or townhouses. This preference has led to urban sprawl, with people living farther from city centers and spending longer commuting. In defense of Australian home buying habits, a large building industry has grown to exploit extreme home prices. However, new apartment buildings often suffer from poor construction standards by developers aiming to flip properties quickly for maximum profit. This familiar scenario has forced many potential apartment buyers back into chasing a limited supply of freestanding homes. On the demand side, it's not just about how many people want to buy a house, but whether they can afford to. Australians, on average, have very high incomes, and the country has the highest minimum wage globally after accounting for exchange rate fluctuations. Australian tax policies heavily support home buying, excluding certain profits from taxation. Investment in rental properties is even more encouraged, allowing people to write off expenses like bank interest or depreciation against their regular income. While writing off such expenses is common worldwide, Australia uniquely allows these expenses to reduce any income, including job income. This means that high-income earners can significantly lower their taxable income through property investments. Australia has some of the highest income taxes in the world, with individuals earning over AUD 180,000 paying 45% on additional income. However, many high earners avoid these taxes by investing in property, claiming paper losses and reducing their tax burden. This tax advantage has turned homes into investments more than living spaces, diverting investment from other sectors like technical innovation, which lags behind other advanced economies, particularly the USA. Housing speculation and poor quality development have become central to Australia's economic growth, similar to the challenges faced by countries like China. Despite making these mistakes, the Australian economy remains unaffected because it's not just about selling rocks or homes, but about selling Australia itself. Australia is highly desirable for immigration due to its political stability, high standard of living, good weather, and cultural diversity. It's an English-speaking country, making it accessible for people from the USA, Canada, and England. Additionally, English is the world's most spoken second language, attracting highly educated people globally. Australian schools are world-class, with top universities often exceeding Ivy League schools in the USA and Europe. This reputation makes education one of Australia's most valuable exports, contributing billions of dollars in tuition and boosting the local economy. Moreover, many highly skilled and wealthy individuals seek to make Australia their home, further stimulating economic growth. Despite high living costs, Australian cities are ranked among the most livable in the world, offering quality of life comparable to Scandinavian countries. Unlike other insular countries, Australia actively encourages migration, attracting skilled and wealthy individuals. The country plans to welcome 1.5 million migrants over the next 4 years, injecting significant money and skills into the economy. This influx of people has made existing Australians some of the wealthiest globally, particularly those owning property near major cities. However, this success has not been shared equally. Output per capita has declined, making it harder for young Australians to afford housing and enjoy a high quality of life. While Australia's economy remains stable due to its attractiveness as a destination, it faces challenges in ensuring equitable wealth distribution and fostering productive industries beyond housing and mining. In conclusion, Australia's economic model, centered on immigration and housing, presents both opportunities and challenges. It must balance attracting new residents with developing sustainable industries to maintain its high quality of life and economic stability. For more insights into Australia's unique relationship with China and other geopolitical issues, check out our geopolitics channel, Context Matters. Thanks for watching.